So getting back a bit to your process, you're getting up every day, you're setting your word count. That includes with Fenris and Mott. And Fenris and Mott, I assume that starts with getting a contract established that you're going to write a book. It's going to have Norse mythology. It's going to have a wolf. How involved? How specific is this contract? That is there wiggle room for you to, if you decide halfway through that, oh, I want to include this crazy thing that I hadn't cleared before, I can, or?
I do have a lot of freedom. So the way, and it works a little different with contracts. So the way I've worked with my editor, this is my, what do I want to say? This is my second contract, this book, and the previous one, Weird Kid. It's the second contract I've had with this editor. So we're familiar with each other. Her expectations have been set to what to expect from me. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of think like, what are some books that would be fun to write? I'll write just sort of an outline, not a very detailed outline or a synopsis, just kind of give a sense for what the book is about. I'll usually do that for a couple of different book ideas. I'll send that to my agent. I'll ask her, like, what do you think looks like the most fun? What do you think is going to has the most reader appeal? And I'm just sort of getting a temperature check. If she shows enthusiasm, sometimes she'll show enthusiasm for one of those book proposals that I sent. Sometimes she'll have equal enthusiasm for all of them, and then it's up to me to pursue it from there. From there, we'll send that to my editor. My editor will say, like, oh, I like this Norse one. That's a great idea. And then when the contract is written up, the language is going to be specific to that book, but it's going to be pretty vague in terms of what the book will be. So in this case, I think it was something like a fantasy taking place in modern times where a girl interacts with the Fenris wolf of Norse mythology. Now, if I decided later, like, I actually don't want to write about Fenris, maybe I want to write about a different character from Norse mythology, a different dog. There's a lot of dogs and wolves in Norse mythology, or a different monster altogether. Or maybe I would like it to take place not in Los Angeles. Maybe I want it to take place like in Iceland. Maybe I want it to take place in prehistoric times. That would be a conversation. I wouldn't be forbidden from doing it. I would not undertake it upon myself just to make that call. We would have a conversation about it. And I think the possibility would still be there for me to write something different than what I proposed, especially if my editor understands, you know what, I thought my heart was going to be in thing A. It's actually very strongly in thing B, as long as thing B isn't completely different from thing A. I think I'd still be able to write that book. It's never come up because, like, I'm not an endless factory that just produces a million different ideas. I kind of get focused on an idea, and especially once my agent thinks it's a good idea and my editor thinks it's a good idea, then that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on that book, and I'm probably not going to want to write something different. But yeah, it's the contracts are they're not shackles, but they do kind of establish a set of expectations.
And your agent is Holly Root, correct?
Holly Root. She is the founder and head agent at Root Literary. She is a fantastic agent. I love working with her. She's kind of like everything I wanted in an agent. She's fantastic. Unfortunately, for the writers out there, she has been forbidden by her own staff of taking on more clients. But there are other agents that work with her at Root Literary, and all of them are really talented, passionate, and just like good, kind, nice people.
And if the audience wants to know more, Holly Root, we had the good fortune to have her on this very show back in 2018. Check the back catalog. You won't be disappointed. And if you're another agent at Root Literary and you've been wanting to come on the show, by God, get in touch. Let's make this happen. It'll be a wonderful conversation. But your experience with Root Literary, that's a fine place for authors. You're very happy with the representation you've received so far.
Yeah, and what I like about their agency is they have agents who they all have their own interests and stuff they like to represent. So for most kind of writing, there's probably an agent there for you. And of course, they're pretty clear on agent query, and I think on their website, of the kind of books they like to represent and the kind of books they don't represent.
So you sit down with the new project, great contract, perfectly negotiated by Hollywood. So all your wishes have been fulfilled. You're happy with that. You sit down, you've got a synopsis. So you're trying to hit your word count. So first day is just chapter 1. I know what happens in chapter 1. Let's get 500 words toward that. Or what happens once it's officially go time?
Once I know once I know I have to write the book, I will spend a couple of weeks brainstorming, and that's very free structured. So I'm asking myself, Greg, what do you want to have in this book? What do you want to have happen? Just as importantly, what do you not want to have happen? What are you not interested in writing about? Because, some ideas in some genres, they lend to themselves really easily to obviously, in a book about Norse mythology, we're going to have Thor. And it's like, no, I'm not going to have Thor. I want Thor to feature in this book. That is something I wrote, no Thor. Why? Not that interested in him as a character. I love the MCU movies. Not that interested in writing about a version of Thor as a character. Also too obvious because of the Thor movies. And it's going to invite comparisons to the Marvel Universe stuff anyway, because it's Norse mythology. I will start just because my brain juices are flowing. There's going to be scenes or bits of dialogue or characters that are just going to occur to me without me having to sit there and focus on making that happen. And I'm going to write all of those down. After a couple of weeks, that's starting to sort of take the shape, not of a synopsis or an outline, but a skeleton. There's a certain shape to the story. There's certain places where things are going to happen, certain things I want to have happen. And I'm going to start writing that down. And then oftentimes, if I'm lucky, and I'm often lucky, I'll kind of know what the ending is. I'll know what the ending is I'm shooting for. So I'm going to have pages and pages of handwritten notes. Some of it will be useful. A lot of it will not be useful. I'm going to take the stuff that's useful that I want to have in the book, and I'm just going to type it out. Those typewritten notes, once I've moved them around in something that's a logical order so that my ideas for the beginning and my ideas for the middle and my ideas for the end are in the proper order, that's kind of a rough outline, or it's a rough synopsis. And then it's an exercise of what's missing? Am I going to get from this bit that I've kind of brainstormed to this bit that I kind of brainstormed? You fill in enough of those gaps and you have a synopsis or an outline. I don't rigidly stick to it, because something that I thought was a good idea before I started writing the book might not work out. So that's going to go away. But what I will make myself do when that happens enough that I find I'm deviating from the outline, I will go revise the outline. I'll write a new outline based on what I have written that I want to keep and the new direction that the story might be going in. So the outline is not something that is fully formed at the beginning that I just methodically follow through the course of drafting the book, but an outline is something that I feel I need. I've been a pantser. I've written without outlines, and I found it doesn't save me time. It takes more time. With Norse code, at one point, I realized I'd gone off in directions that weren't working. And I remember one day at Starbucks, I used to write at Starbucks or another coffee shop before work. One day I threw out 30,000 words, which was a good chunk of a book. And that was a bad day. And since that day, I pledged to myself, to the extent I can, to learn how to outline and to learn how to write from an outlined book. I'd rather have an outline that's not working out and have to adjust than write without an outline and find I have a novel. I have chapters and chapters and tens of thousands of words that's not working out.
But even within that, you're keeping your outline loose enough that if you have sudden inspiration that, wooden aliens, that'll work perfectly here, or whatever it is, you can still move that outline around and still be more or less reasonably on track to come in about where you said you would, right?
Yeah, well, I know myself enough to know when I'm veering off because I lack inspiration or I lack energy or I haven't figured out how to mechanically do something in my story, or a part that I thought I knew what was going to happen or that I thought was pretty tightly plotted turns out to not be tightly plotted. I thought I knew what I was doing. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then out of desperation, sometimes I'll come up with the Pinocchians. We'll drop the Pinocchians in. And I know myself enough to know don't go with the first thing that occurs to you without considering how it's going to affect the rest of the story. And don't just drop something in because it occurs to you if that's going to alter how the story ends. And if you do want to keep that thing, that if you do want to keep the Pinocchians, I have to have the discipline to think it all the way through to find out, is that ending going to stay the same, or does the book go off in a different direction and I have to write a new ending? So sometimes it's tempting, just like this chapter, completely different stuff happens, and fool myself into thinking like, well, that's not going to mess up the direction the story wants to go in. You know, stories have a certain momentum, you know, and you can break that momentum by an opposing force and send it into a different trajectory, and that's okay. But you have to be aware that that's what you're doing and be cognizant, like, now I'm going to deal with a different set of story problems and a different set of puzzles and problems to solve. But yeah, I can say like, oh, you know what? I think it would be interesting if they met this character and this happened. And it does land me in about the same place, or a place, maybe a different place, but a place I feel I can adapt to. That I do all the time, and that's fun. So it is a mix of premeditation and spontaneity. And I know there's some writers that work completely spontaneously, and then there's a guy like Tim Powers, who's a writer I love, and he said, like, if he's got an outline and a spontaneous idea occurs to him, he beats it to death with a hammer. He resists the temptation to deviate from his outline. That's how he writes books. So much of writing is figuring out how your own brain works, you know, and the only way to do that, I feel, is to write books and to have to suffer all the setbacks and the problems and the obstacles, and have to untie the knots and deal with the problems you've created for yourself. So much of that is just figuring out how the storytelling part of your brain works, and understanding that, and understanding how to use that storytelling part of your brain as the most efficient story machine that you can make it into.
Issue I run into is I know how my brain works when it writes the book I just finished, but the new book, I don't know how to make my brain work.
That's a Gene Wolfe quote.
In the new way for the new story.
That is a Gene Wolfe quote. You do not learn how to write a novel. You only learn how to write the novel you are currently writing. And there's a lot of truth to that. And it's frustrating, because I would just love to, like, hey, finally, I've written 10 books. Now I know what I'm doing. Easy peasy. Let's go write the other 10 and it'll be a breeze. And it's not like that. Every time I sit down, it's like, I've never done this before. What am I doing? How did I get those other ones done? I have no idea what I'm doing. And yeah, and you got to figure it out all over again. I don't know why. I have no idea why our brains work that way.
I find I need to keep the finished ones within eyesight, so I can look over and like, I can't do this. I have done it.
That is absolutely the one thing you get from writing books, is knowing that you can do it. My very first novel, that's the only reason why I wrote it. I didn't write it expecting to get an agent, and I didn't with it. I didn't write it expecting it to get published, and it didn't get published, but it was a total success, because I just wanted to say, like, I have written a novel from the beginning to the end, and it has a middle. So now when I go on to the next one, I can never say to myself, like, I can't do it, because look at it. I just did. I can do it. No matter how hard it is, no matter how hard the day is writing, I know, like, I can do it. I know I can do it. I have to remind myself. Sometimes I have to remind myself pretty strenuously, like, I can do this, because yeah, I've done it. I've done it before.
Then you got to keep your mind from playing that other trick on you. Well, I've already written my best possible novel. It'll never get that good again.
Fortunately, I'm not a big fan of my work. So it's like, oh my God, well, let's try it again. See if we can get it right this time.
I guess that has the upside of you're always about to write your greatest novel, I suppose.
Yeah, sometimes my greatest novel, like, that's probably 4 novels away. So I got to write these 4 novels so I can get to that magic, great, perfect novel.